Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Egan, and I am the president of the Myasthenia Gravis Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you to our 64th annual meeting and educational seminar. Thank you so much for being here this morning. We're thrilled to have people join us both in person and virtually. We have over 100 people that are dialing in virtually, so welcome to all of you that are dialing in. We're thrilled that you're on this call as well. For those of you that are participating virtually, if you registered by August the 18th, you would have received one of these packets in the mail. And I hope everybody in the room looks like you received your packet when you checked in this morning. If you registered after August the 18th, it should be showing up this week, but if for some reason you don't get it, just reach out to the Myasthenia Gravis office and we can send that out to you. Most of the information in the program today, especially our financial information, is, excuse me, you may recall that because we have this meeting at the end of the year, the information that's in there is from 2023, not from this year, but we still want to report it. But if there's any questions you have about the financial information in there, Derek Haverkamp is our treasurer. We'll be happy to answer any of those questions for you. I want to start just by thanking some people today. We have some incredible sponsors that are with us this morning, and I saw that there was a lot of activity in that room, so thank you for talking to our sponsors, and I want to welcome them. During the breaks, we can go back in there, and at the end, when we have lunch, they'll be in there as well. So please take the time to meet them. I want to thank our sponsors, Alexion, Argenix, UCB, Amgen, Immunovant, Johnson & Johnson, Cartesian, Catalyst, Kyverna, EMD Serono, Regeneron, Sunflower State Vital Care, Heritage Biologics, and Distinctive Meetings who are putting this on for us today. Thank you so much for your generous support. We couldn't do this without you, so thank you. And additionally, I want to thank Prompt Care, formerly ARJ Infusion Services, who are helping issue the nursing CEUs for the nurses that are attending today. So thank you to them. At the close of today's meeting, we're going to present two awards. The first one is a Stackhouse Award, which goes to someone who exemplifies a spirit of volunteerism and leadership embodied in the philosophy of the Myasthenia Gravis Association. That'll be our first award. And then our second award is going to be the Volunteer of the Year Award. And we'll do those at the conclusion of the meeting. Earlier this week, the board met, and every year we have to go through this process where we elect the officers for the board, and we reset up the members of the board that are up for renewal. They come up for a vote again. So we had the meeting this week. The officers for 2025, I'll be the president for one more year. Brody Beck will be the vice president. Stephanie Hubers, secretary, and Derek Haverkamp will be the treasurer for 2025. The board members that will continue to serve in 2025 are Keith Asali, Joe Bant, Megan Choate, Mamtha Pasnor, Graham Natz, Al Dimmitt, Tom Van Sage, Lindsay Fleece, and Ashley Steele, who most of them are running around today, but congratulations to the board members. And I have to give my thanks to them. We have a small organization with Allison and Catherine and McKenna. That's the staff. And then we have this board of directors that helps support Allison and support all of you. And they give a lot of their time and energy at all the events and providing guidance. So I want to just personally thank the board members for all of the work that they do throughout the year. At this time, I'd like to welcome our executive director, Allison Foss, to the stage.
Good morning. We are so happy to have you here with us this morning, both in person and virtually. We have a great lineup of speakers this morning, as well as a great room of exhibits and people here to talk to you about the newest, latest, and greatest in the MG space. During our break and at the conclusion of our programming, you'll have time to go back and meet with all of them. Before we get started, I want to say a huge thank you to McKenna Fulton and Catherine Clemens. I think they're both still out at registration, but they round out our small but mighty team. I mean it every time that I say it, that we're boots on the ground and we really work to get to know the individuals that we serve. They work tirelessly, making sure that every single detail is covered throughout all of our programs and in our clinics. So additionally, a thank you to our board of directors. If you are on our board of directors, if you will stand, if you are in the room. Might be just, I think they're also all running around. But thank you. An additional thank you to our medical advisory committee. We appreciate all their support and input. Again, because we're a small organization, it truly is all hands on deck. We all wear a lot of hats, and we appreciate all the hard work. So it's an exciting time for our organization. We're in the midst of a strategic plan for the next 3 years. We'll have a plan update after the new year. We really appreciated all the feedback that we received from the survey that went out in May. So thank you. And then once again, we're really thankful to have Distinctive Meeting Group working with us. This is our 4th year of working with them. They have helped us execute to make the hybrid possible so people can connect online. If you can also believe it, we have people tuned in from across the globe this morning. We have people from 8 countries and 33 states that are tuned in, which is pretty cool. So also a huge thank you to our support group leaders and volunteers. If you will all stand, we had a meeting yesterday with many of them. I think they're in the room. If you're a support group leader, if you'll stand. Thank you for your time. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Michael shared with you the great list of sponsors that we have this morning. So we're also thankful that we can give the continuing CEU credits to nurses. I think we have about 20 nurses getting their CEUs today. So you'll also note that we have a bake sale going on in the room across the hall. A special thanks to Brian Bosch. He's one of our support group leaders, and he donated all the items to the bake sale. So enjoy. Following today's program, you'll get a survey, and we would love your feedback on our programming and any other comments that you might have. During the keynotes, we'll take questions at the end. If you're following online, please use the question or chat feature, and we'll answer those at the end of the keynote. So with no further ado, I want to roll into our first keynote. One of the comments we get often is people want to hear a personal story about somebody living with myasthenia gravis. And this morning we're going to do just that. We have the opportunity to share with you the keynote of a lady battling myasthenia gravis. She spoke to our webinar group a couple of years ago, and I was highly impressed with her compassion and her empathy. She's an OBGYN by trade. She's come in this morning from Little Rock, and she's been living with myasthenia gravis for over 10 years. So we're excited to welcome to the stage Dr. Vickie Petz Kasper.
Well, first of all, welcome to the club that nobody wants to be in, right? Who signed up for this? Did you sign up for this? Did you sign up for this? I didn't sign up to have a disease that's hard to pronounce and nobody can see it. Like, yeah, I know the ragdoll thing, but what does weakness look like? I mean, you can't go to the doctor and let them put an otoscope in your ear and go, ah, I see that weakness in there. There's no body scan where they can go, oh, that muscle is weak. I can tell by looking. Now, what is weakness? Weakness is a feeling. And I remember the first time that I was in an online support group and I heard someone describe the MG feeling in their shoulders. And I was so excited. I was like, oh, somebody gets it. Somebody knows what I'm feeling and I'm not crazy. Well, actually, I may be crazy, but that is another story for another day. But the MG feeling, that gave me so much hope to know that someone knew what I was talking about. Someone knew what it was like to dial up gravity about 8 notches. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So, how did we get so lucky to have this disease? And do you wish that there was an unsubscribe button? Or at least a rewind button so that you could go back to the way life was before you had MG? I think that we all have a story. We all have a moment in time when we knew that life would never be the same. I think I'm pushing the wrong button here. Can you advance that? Because it's not advancing for me. Again, I think we all have a story of what life was like before, a moment when we knew that life would never be the same. And so what I'd like to do is start off by introducing you to my pre-MG self. Myself thought I had a really good life. I thought I had it all. At my office, at my OBGYN practice, my halls were lined with pictures of my smiling face holding precious newborn babies. And the halls of my home were lined with the smiling faces of my family. I had been happily married for 30 years to my high school sweetheart, and we had a beautiful family in our beautiful life. Mom, dad, boy, girl, and a dog named Sammy Joe. And I loved what I did in my career. I delivered 5,000 babies during my career. And it never got old, not even in the middle of the night. Because let me tell you, nothing compares to the feel of newborn baby feet, except maybe the look in a mother's eyes when she touches them for the first time. And I had the honor and privilege of sitting on a padded rolling stool and doling out advice to women from all walks of life. Women who shared with me their deepest fears and insecurities, and it's a privilege to have such a unique insight into a woman's soul. And I always say I got to know a lot of beautiful women inside and out, but that is a bad gynecology joke. Glad y'all have a sense of humor. But it's a good thing that when I sat on that stool, I had all of the answers, because one day I fell off that stool and I landed on the other side of the sheets. But I was 50 years old at the time, and I was more physically fit than I had ever been in my entire life, thanks to a method known as Tabata. I don't know if you've heard of Tabata, but it's 20 seconds on and 10 seconds off. And in my mind, I thought I can do anything for 20 seconds. So every Friday morning, I went to this exercise class, and I did all of these things, including push-ups. And I got to where I could do 80 Army-style push-ups, 80. My muscles were big and strong and defined. And I had a passion for road cycling, and I pedaled my bicycle about 100 miles a week. This was my pre-MG self. And I'm a very goal-oriented person. I like to set goals for myself. And so every year I would set a fitness goal. The first year I started cycling, I wanted to ride 1,000 miles in a year. And me and my daughter crossed that finish line of 1,000 miles, and we toasted with our water bottles. Now, I was not that adept at putting my water bottle back into that little cage, and it rolled all the way down the hill, so then we were running down the hill to go get the water bottle. But we celebrated 1,000 miles in a year. The next year, when I was 48 years old, on my actual 48th birthday, I wanted to ride a century, which is 100 miles. I did it in 100-degree heat in a race down in Wichita Falls, Texas, called Hotter Than Hell. Don't put that on your bucket list. It was miserable. I don't ever want to do that again. The next year, my goal was to do a sprint triathlon. I was not any good at running, but I had a new puppy, and she liked to run with me. And I was particularly bad at swimming. I was swimming along. Everybody else was already out of the water, going on their way. I'm finally the last one out of the water. Passed everybody on the bike. They passed me again on the run, but I finished. My 50th year, though, was a different moment in my life. For my 50th year, I wanted to come to this great state of Missouri to ride the Katy Trail. Are y'all familiar with the Katy Trail? It's not far from here. It's 257 miles across a Rails to Trails project. And I plan to ride the whole enchilada with my 3 cycling buddies. And I spent 6 months studying that online, that official guide to the Katy Trail, and I made reservations at all these eclectic restaurants and bed and breakfast. In my mind, I had it all laid out. We're going to ride this trail over 5 days. But the day before the trip, everything changed. I packed everything I needed for 5 days in a box the size of a lunchbox, which in and of itself was a feat for a woman. But I had to go to work. I had to get some things done before I could leave on vacation. And so I had a meeting that morning at 7 o'clock. On the 3rd floor was the conference room. I took the elevator that day. And when my beeper went off to summon me to the operating room to do a C-section, I slowly walked out of the meeting room. And I felt everyone stare at me. They were used to my little clippy feet. I walked so fast. And when I got to those stairs, I knew I needed to take the elevator again. And I went into the operating room to do that C-section, and in the middle of a C-section, my hands refused to obey my brain. And I kept staring at them, expecting them to move, and they were just still. And my partner looked at me across that mask, and our eyes spoke volumes. And she reached across the open abdomen, took the instruments from my hand, and my thighs felt like I'd held a squat for too long, and I leaned against the wall, surrendered to that pull of gravity, and sat on the floor. The mom's heart rate monitor was beeping, the baby was screaming, Dad was just grinning, and I'm sitting on the floor of the operating room. And I felt like concrete was pouring into my body from some unseen source. And it weighed 1,000 pounds. And that concrete began to make its way down my throat into my chest. And I struggled for every breath, and I wasn't sure how long I could keep up the effort. And one wheelchair ride transitioned me from from surgeon in the operating room to patient in the emergency room. And in that moment, I knew that life would never be the same. Sorry, I'm forgetting these slides here. And I laid on that gurney in the emergency room where everyone knew me. Everyone knew that I pushed myself to the limit. Everyone knew that I'd never taken a sick day in 20 years. Everyone knew that I never sat still for more than 5 seconds. But they did not know how to treat my disease. Now, my disease was not a mystery. We knew what my diagnosis was. You see, 6 weeks earlier, I was riding in the back seat of a car when I glanced in the rearview mirror, and I noticed that my right eyebrow looked like a caterpillar sitting above my sunglasses. Well, I thought my sunglasses were crooked, so I took my sunglasses off, and I readjusted them, and I put them back on, and that caterpillar didn't budge. So I took my glasses off again, and I put them on again, and I finally had to admit that my sunglasses were not crooked, but my face was. And if I'd have looked at those pictures on the walls of my office or in the halls of my home, I would have noticed that more than a few things were crooked. It did not take a neurologist long to recognize the MG face, and I was immediately diagnosed with ocular myasthenia gravis. And I began to experience something that was totally foreign to me, and that's fear. I was afraid that the disease would take away everything I loved about my active life. And most of the time I was okay during the day, but when I laid my head on that pillow at night, it activated a cotton candy machine in my head that just picked up more and more sticky junk every time it swirled around. And that day, in the operating room, all of my worst fears came true. And I lost nearly everything. I lost a career that I loved. I lost my marriage. I lost my appearance, thanks to prednisone, and the ability to enjoy my active life. Now, because they knew me, but they didn't know how to treat my disease, they sent me to a different hospital where they knew how to treat my disease, but they didn't know me. I was just the patient in room 421 in a gown about 3 sizes too big, laying there limp as a rag doll. And they pumped me full of the evil, wicked drug prednisone. Evil, wicked drug. And every day, the attending physician would come in with an entourage of people, residents and medical students and interns and some people they saw walking down the sidewalk. It was like a parlor trick. They wanted to see my eyelids fall like a window shade. How many of you can do that parlor trick? And I get it. They needed to learn. I didn't mind at all. But every day they would come in, and they would hold their finger up for a full 2 minutes. Watch those eyelids fall. But for some reason, when they tested my arms, I think they forgot that myasthenia gravis is a disease of fatigable weakness. And so they would ask me to flex my biceps one time. Did I tell you I was strong? Because I told them. I don't think they were listening. And for those of you who are in the healthcare profession, I want to remind you that the most important diagnostic tools that you have at your disposal are located on the sides of your head, and you were born with them. The most important thing you can do for your patients is listen. But they came in every day, and I flexed my bicep this side and this side, and then they walked out the room, and I could barely get my fork to my mouth, much less chew my food once it was there. And this went on for 5 days, ironically, the same 5 days that I was supposed to be on the Katy Trail. And on the 5th day, the attending physician came into my room, and they were getting ready to send me home. And she accused me of faking. Now, I have often faked being well, but I have never faked being sick. And the betrayal from my own profession was a wound that was just nearly as incurable as the disease. It was hard to accept, and it was a journey. And MG took so much from me. And I just wonder, what has MG taken from you? Because I imagine in this room there are a lot of losses, big losses, devastating losses, and maybe a long journey to get someone to listen to you and figure out what was wrong. And I'd like you to think about every single one of them. And in fact, I'm going to challenge you that when you go home, I want you to write them down. I think there's something therapeutic about facing your grief. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. So write down all of the things that MG has taken from you. But then, I want to know if you could think of myasthenia gravis as a gift. Stick with me for just a minute. We're going to talk about gifts. So I fancy myself as someone who gives really good gifts because I like to listen to people and I like to get them something I know that they would want. So I give really good gifts. But y'all, I am lousy at wrapping them. I always have been this way. I don't know what the deal is. I get the box and I'll put it down in the middle of all that paper and I measure real carefully and I take the scissors and for some reason they always like veer off that way. And then I pull it together and there is always a gap. No matter how many times I've measured, there's always a gap. And so then I take a scrap piece of paper and I kind of splice it in there and tape it. And then I start folding in those little ends, to make that pointy thing. But mine never is in the center. It's always kind of wappy-jawed off to the side, and I just put a big old hunk of tape over it. It looks terrible, and I never use a bow unless I just find a crumpled one in the bottom of the closet. It's pathetic. I am wrapping impaired. But here's the good news. They came out with these gift sacks, gift sacks. You can reuse those things 100 times. The problem is I reused the tissue paper, and it's 87 cents a package. The other problem is I live in Arkansas, and in the South, all of my friends have been to the Southern Ladies School of Wrapping Gifts. So they can wrap a gift that looks like this. So when I go to a party, a shower, whatever, I'm kind of embarrassed about my gift. I'm not embarrassed about the gift. I'm embarrassed about the way it looks when it's wrapped. And so I might take it and put it inside my coat if I can, or behind my purse, or I might just kind of try to hide it like this when I walk in so I can get it out with the other gifts. Now, once it's unwrapped, I don't mind. It's just the wrapping paper is so ugly. It's funny because these hands have delivered 5,000 babies. I can take out a uterus, I can tie up a bladder, and I can't wrap a gift. What's up with that? Well, I'll tell you. The reason I think that I can't wrap a gift is because I think that wrapping paper is really just trash. I mean, one of two things is going to happen. You've got those people that'll pick at the tape, and they'll pull it back, and then they'll fold it over, and they'll make a nice, neat rectangle that they throw away. Or other people just rip the paper off and make a giant paper wad, and they throw it away, and the difference is about 15 seconds. Either way, wrapping paper is just trash. It's what's inside that matters. The gifts are inside. So could you just start to think of myasthenia gravis as the wrapping paper and look for the gifts that are inside? But it's not easy, is it? How do you find the gifts? Well, first of all, I've already told you that I give really good gifts. I just don't wrap them very well. So if I showed up with a package and it looked really terrible, but I handed it to you, what would you say? You'd say, thank you. I believe that to unwrap the gifts of myasthenia gravis, we have to start with gratitude. A heart of gratitude changes your perspective in so many ways. It changes your focus. And in fact, science tells us that it actually has the power to rewire our brains. There's something called neuroplasticity, where your brain starts to make new connections and form new pathways. And gratitude helps this process. And it's a positive feedback loop, so that the more things you find to be grateful for, the more things you'll notice to be grateful for. And it actually even changes your brain chemistry. It causes the release of dopamine, which is the reward neurotransmitter, and serotonin, the happy neurotransmitter. And it lowers levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, easing stress and anxiety. Gratitude can improve sleep and resilience and your positive social relationships. Gratitude has an incredible power to change your outlook. And so when I was first diagnosed, and I was really very, very sick and unable to do much of anything, and I was still on the evil, wicked drug prednisone, and I would wake up every morning before the sun came up, and I would drag one foot in front of the other and get out to my porch long before the sun came up. And I would sit there and count my blessings for hours, out loud, starting at the beginning. I was thankful I was born healthy. Many people are not. I was thankful I didn't get this disease until I was 50 so that I could play with my kids and play kickball and rollerblade and all those things, because I was that kind of mom. And I would just go on and on and on, looking for things to be grateful for and saying it out loud. And I'm pretty sure that all of you have a lot of things that you can be grateful for. And so I would encourage you to say those out loud. Say them out loud to yourself when you're alone, but also speak them in conversation. Because if you're not careful, this disease that's hard to pronounce can become your identity. Don't let myasthenia gravis become your identity. Let people see your resilience and your inner strength instead. Speak it out loud. But also, I think there's so much power in writing things down. You can keep a gratitude journal. Again, studies in medicine have shown that there's tremendous benefit to that. Write it on index cards. Put those index cards in your car, under your sun visor, on your mirror in your bathroom where you can see them, and be reminded of all the things that you have that you can be thankful for. The second way I believe that you unwrap your gift is by changing your focus. Did you know that a dime can block the light of the sun? If you held it right here. You can't see anything if you hold it right in front of your eye. And between doctor's appointments and infusions and medications and tests and all the things that you have to do when you have a chronic illness, it's easy for it to become your focus. And again, your identity. Change your focus. Rather than an inward focus, an outward focus. Start focusing on other people and what you can do for them. So what can you do? I mean, myasthenia gravis can limit you. I am not suggesting that you rake your neighbor's yard. But what can you do? There are things you can do. There are things you are passionate about. Can you volunteer for something, even if it's online? And I've already had many conversations with people that are doing so many great things for the myasthenia community. People in this room, and I'm sure people online, people that I've met along the way. It's amazing. And social connectedness is so important for us. It releases a neurotransmitter hormone as well called oxytocin. That's known as the love hormone, by the way. Oxytocin helps our social relationships, and it improves our health and our sense of well-being. We have to focus on something besides ourselves and our disease, because listen, you are so much more than a neurologist 8:45 appointment, or an antibody, or an EMG, or an insurance denial, or a disability denial. You are a whole person with purpose and meaning. And I know for so long I sat in my recliner with that little active puppy dog at my feet, and my body conformed to the shape of my recliner in the shape of a C. Don't let the recliner confine you to your comfort zone, because there are things that you can be doing. And I believe that probably most people listening today are involved in support groups, but it is so important because nobody else gets it. If you haven't felt it, you don't know what that MG feeling is. Your doctor doesn't know what that MG feeling is, but other people get it. So stay involved in those support groups. I think they're so important, whether they're in person or online, because focusing on other people will help you unwrap the gift. And I want you to embrace the gift. There are so many gifts that myasthenia gravis can give you. A sense of purpose and well-being that's different than what you've had before. And maybe you're thinking, no, there is nothing good that can come from this disease. So I want to share with you my post-MG self, my life after myasthenia gravis. And I want to share with you the gifts that it's given me. First of all, myasthenia gravis gave me the gift of time. I never had time. I lived my life in overdrive. In fact, I say I lived my life on a merry-go-round. And I love a good spin. I love a good spin on a merry-go-round, but I am terribly prone to motion sickness, so after about 3 seconds, I want to puke. And the problem with merry-go-rounds is there's really no good way to get off, unless, of course, you get a disease that throws you off. I never had time. I had 40 patients a day. I had the hospital calling. I had the pharmacy calling, the emergency room calling. The nurse was asking me questions. I never had time for anything. And suddenly, I had time. I had time to read and think and pray and figure out who I am if I'm not Dr. or Mrs. And let me tell you, being a doctor, it's what I did. It's not who I am. But I've had time to figure out who I am, and I want you to figure out, who are you when everything else is stripped away? Who are you? I had time to spend with people that I truly cared about. My daughter used to call me and she'd say, "Are you busy?" And I'm like, am I busy? Yes, I'm busy. Now I have time to talk to her every day. She calls me on her way home from work. I talk to her every day. I had time to spend with people I truly cared about, and I think without MG, I would have just rushed into the grave. I had time to form new relationships and new friendships through support groups, through online support groups. I remember one person in particular that I particularly connected with, and we got to meet at the Myasthenia meeting several years ago in New Orleans, and have kind of a funny story. And in August, I went to Maine for my birthday, and he lives in Portland. And I connected with him. He can barely stand. He is completely unable to walk. And him and his wife gave us a tour of Portland that was just fabulous. And I left my sunglasses in his back seat, so he had to rescue me and bring those to me. All because we have the same disease. I've connected with people all over the world that I would have never met had I not had myasthenia gravis. There are things you can do for other people. Maybe you have a talent, an artistic ability, some creativity. I know one year my daughter and I took little teal-colored beads and we strung them together on pipe cleaners and made snowflake Christmas ornaments. And I sent those out to people that I'd met online that I have never met in person. And every year when I pull that little homemade Christmas ornament out to hang on my tree, I am reminded of all the wonderful connections and friendships that MG has given me. MG has given me the gift of connection, not only in online support groups, but in-person support groups. I met many people. I needed them, and they needed me. We needed to hear each other's journey. And I had a new group of friends that came and surrounded me and helped me on a day-to-day basis. When I was alone, they helped me. And I just want to tell you that asking for help, it's a sign of strength, not weakness. You may be weak on the outside, but that inner strength is what matters. And I am so very grateful for all the people who came along beside me and helped me in those new friendships that I formed. The other thing that myasthenia gravis gave me is the true desire of my heart. You see, ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to write. I wrote my first book when I was in the 5th grade. It was called Mr. Mouse and Mojay. And Mojay was some kind of little creature. He was blue, and he had like a red belly, and he rescued all of the forest animals from some impending doom. I don't know. I illustrated this book with colored pencils, and I took it down to the public library, because that's what you did back then. This was 1975. And we put it in a manila envelope, and they mailed it off to a children's book publisher. I'm still waiting to hear from them. I hope they didn't put my book in a slush pile somewhere. But I wanted to write all my life. And I don't know, somewhere along the way that just kind of started to sound silly to me, like maybe a little boy that wants to play for the Kansas City Chiefs. It just sounded like pie in the sky. And so I did the obvious thing, and I went to medical school instead. But I always wanted to write. When I got MG, and I'm in that recliner with my hands limp at my side, my arms useless, my legs useless, my whole self feeling useless, like I had no purpose or direction. And I got out my laptop and I started to write. For many years, I wrote a blog called My Right Side Up Life. Because when I first got sick, I got a little note from my pastor, and he said, "I'm praying for you because I know your life's been turned upside down." And I said, "You know what? In a whole lot of ways, my life has been turned right side up." And so I wrote this blog for several years. And then I wrote a book. When I had that betrayal from my doctor and the betrayal in my marriage, it wore what I call a rut in my brain. And this goes back to that neuroplasticity. If you think the same thoughts over and over and over, it's hard to stop that cycle because now you've created a neural pathway that your brain just wants to go down like a slide. And so I wrote a book. It's called Dressing the Wound, and it compares the healing of a surgical wound to the healing of an emotional wound. And I had to write this book for myself because I was rehearsing conversations that I wished I'd have had, conversations that I had, and I was going over them over and over and over in my brain, and I needed the therapy of writing. So think about what you can do that is therapy for yourself and things that you can pass on to other people. And be patient. It takes time. Anytime you have a challenge, it's an opportunity to grow, to learn new coping skills that you can share with other people. And so I share this in writing. I've got a few copies out at the table if anybody's interested. But this was a book that I wrote for myself. It's not a book to read, it's a book to do. And sometimes I have to do it over and over. My life has gone on a completely different course. I remarried, I relocated, and I reinvented myself more than once. After spending 7 years in hospital administration as a chief medical officer, which gave me a whole different perspective on healthcare, I quit my job in December. I got board certified in lifestyle medicine. Now, I had always been very health conscious. Isn't that ironic? What is fair about that? I exercised and I ate right, and then I get this disease. But there was one part of my health that I always neglected, and that's rest. I treated rest like a 4-letter word. You know what? We have to rest. Myasthenia Gravis forced me to rest, very much against my will. But it was good for me, in here and in here. I always said sleep was for wimps. How silly is that? I'm a lot smarter now. Babies come at all hours of the night. I didn't have a lot of control over it, but I didn't rest and I didn't sleep. And I didn't realize how important those things were for my health and how much research is now coming out that those types of things can contribute to autoimmune diseases. So I got board certified in lifestyle medicine, which is a subspecialty of conventional medicine that uses the power of nutrition, physical fitness, social connectedness, managing stress, minimizing exposure to harmful substances, and restorative sleep to treat, prevent, and reverse disease. And the way I got interested in this is when I was on the evil, wicked drug prednisone, I had a pretty severe case of diabetes. I took Januvia and metformin and insulin, and my blood sugar would still shoot up over 300, and then when I woke up in the morning, it was normal at 70, and the fluctuations were just miserable. When I got off the evil, wicked drug prednisone, then the diabetes went away, but because of my family history, it started creeping back in. And my doctor looked at me one day and he said, "Are you willing to make some radical changes in your life?" And I said, "I'll do anything to not be diabetic." And so he recommended a book that's by a doctor who specializes in lifestyle medicine, and I started doing those things, and I was able to reverse that diabetes. My sister was able to reverse her diabetes. It is a powerful thing to use lifestyle, and I think that now the medical field is recognizing that that's available. And it's an exciting time. I mean, when I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis 10 years ago, there were not any treatments really. I did all the ones that were available, and I obviously am better. I have been in remission without medication for about 4 or 5 years now. And so I'm very fortunate. I am seronegative, so that's one of the reasons that I was accused of faking. But now I'm able to practice by telehealth in lifestyle medicine in Arkansas and Tennessee. I have a telehealth practice called Equilibrium Medical. But more fun than that, I have a podcast. And it's called Healthy Looks Great on You, and I talk about all things lifestyle medicine. So if you're not tired of hearing my voice and my accent at this point, I would love for you to sign up to follow my podcast. I have a sign-up sheet out there at my book table, but I also have this QR code. If you want to scan that, that takes you right to my website where you can sign up. But I believe that the biggest gift that Myasthenia Gravis has given me is connection to other people who have something in common. It's rare. A lot of people have never heard of it. They can't pronounce it. But we get it. And we get each other and we need each other. And I'm so thankful to be connected to different people. And I'd love to stay connected with you. You can find me just about anywhere. I'm on Facebook as Dr. Vickie. My podcast is on Apple and Spotify and Podbean and all the places. And I would love to stay connected with you. And I would also be happy to entertain any questions. I would like to thank Allison. She does such a fantastic job. She has taken this and turned it into something that helps so many people. Y'all are very fortunate to have her. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to enter any kind of discussion that y'all want or take any questions. Yes.
Two things. You said you're diagnosed with ocular myasthenia gravis. But you was strapped in your arms and your legs. Is an ocular usually just in the head?
I had the ocular. I was diagnosed with ocular myasthenia gravis 6 weeks before it generalized to the rest of my body. I actually, looking back at those pictures of me holding all those newborn babies at 3 o'clock in the morning, my eyebrow was up to here for probably about 5 years before I was diagnosed, and I went to the eye doctor over and over and over because I just couldn't focus. And that's not good when you're a surgeon. He kept adjusting my prescription and at one point told me that my eyes were weak and that I should be able to strengthen them. And this eye still turns in. I do have some residual ocular symptoms, but 85% of the time, ocular myasthenia gravis progresses to generalized myasthenia gravis. And that's why I was so fearful during those 6 weeks. I describe it as something that came on very suddenly. You know, I was just pushing through and ignoring symptoms. So I think it came on more slowly.
About reversing diabetes. You might have said it, but I didn't catch it.
Reversing diabetes, you talked about.
Yeah, so lifestyle medicine uses all of those 6 things that I mentioned. The diet is plant-based. And so there's lots of research about plant-based diets. I'm not vegetarian, I'm not vegan, those are different. Vegan is something that people do strictly for the environment and for the sake of treating animals well. Vegetarian is people who eat vegetables and fruit, but they don't eat meat at all. I eat plant-based, whole food. It's been a game changer for me. And my husband is slowly becoming a convert. It's been interesting. I do eat meat, I just don't eat a lot. A lot of people recommend that you eat chicken or fish once a week, eat red meat once a month, but mostly whole food, plant-based. And there's a lot of data that it prevents dementia and reverses diabetes.
I have a question.
So did you have a thymectomy?
I did. And at the time, there was no conclusive evidence that it worked. She asked if I had a thymectomy. There was no conclusive evidence that it worked. And here's the interesting thing I'll never forget my doctor saying. My doctor, who had put me on 60 milligrams of prednisone, looked me in the eye when I told her I wanted to have a thymectomy. And she said, I know you're a surgeon and you have that cut-it-out mentality, but there are risks with surgery. And I'm like, lady, you just put me on 60 milligrams of prednisone and never discussed the risks with me. But I wanted to have it done robotically. I actually went to New York and had it done robotically, and the surgeon there said, I believe it works, and I believe it works if you do it sooner rather than later. And again, I'm seronegative, but my insurance paid for it, and then after that, the data came out that showed that it is effective.
Right here.
Well, I just, I had a comment first. Number one, don't feel bad that you got called a faker. there's those of us that are seropositive, and we get called fakers too. So, you know, it happens with rare disease. But I wanted to ask you, I heard you talk about your arms. I heard you talk about, you know, your legs and everything like that. But I was wondering if you ever also experienced some of the, like, the breathing difficulties and any of those, because
Experience some what? I'm sorry. pardon.
breathing difficulties.
Breathing?
Did you ever have any problems with your breathing or anything like that?
Yeah, that's interesting as well. So this was what led to them, I think, thinking that I was faking. So I was very physically fit, but I was having trouble breathing. But I was able to breathe because my abs were strong enough. The weakness is diaphragmatic weakness. And so I had a nurse, and he came in one morning and he said, "Have you had any trouble breathing?" And I said, "Yeah, I had a little bit last night." This was during my first hospitalization. And he said, "Why didn't you tell anybody?" I said, "Well, I was able to breathe with my abs." And he said, "If you have that again, I want you to push your button and let somebody know." Well, the next day it was worse, because sometimes when you're on prednisone for the first time, it actually makes your symptoms worse. And so I was having a lot of trouble breathing, and so I pushed the button, and they all come running in and everything, and they're, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, I'm having a little trouble breathing." And they didn't know what to do. I'm not kidding you. They did not know what to do. So they put a little pulse ox on my finger, and my oxygen level was 100% because, like, there's nothing wrong with my lungs. My oxygen exchange is perfectly normal. And then they ordered ABGs, which is arterial blood gases, but it took about an hour before anybody came to draw them, and I was better by then, and so I refused. And they really did not know what to do. And so when the doctor confronted me at faking, she said, "Well, your oxygen level was normal, and you wouldn't even let them do the ABGs." And I'm like, "What?" So I think that she thought I was having an anxiety attack. And I said, "Well, I looked at my vital signs. My blood pressure was about 100/70, and my heart rate was 60. I thought with anxiety you would have a little hypertension and tachycardia." So, yeah, I think that was one of the reasons. But I did have a little trouble breathing, and even, for that first probably 6 or 8 months, I did. But I was never on a ventilator, thank goodness.
Dr. Vickie, I have another question back here, but one that came in online, you were talking about this just now, but it said, did you have treatment after the prednisone?
Yes, I had a lot of treatment after the prednisone. I was on IVIG every 3 weeks for 5 years. I did sub-Q IG every week for 1 year. I did plasmapheresis once. It didn't help me much. Had the thymectomy, and I was on azathioprine, which made me sick as a dog. So they switched me over to Cellcept, which is mycophenolate, and I took a really high dose of mycophenolate for a lot of years. It was before all these new treatments. I think there's so much opportunity for new treatments now.
Hi, Vickie. John Popinsick. I was started with ocular myasthenia gravis, like you have, when I was 43. I'm currently 73.
Oh, wow.
And I went everywhere. I originally lived in Pennsylvania, and I'm a Vietnam-era veteran, and I had every x-ray you can imagine. And the gift that myasthenia gave me was that when they took a CT scan, they found a carcinoid tumor in my left lung. And had I not gone through all this trying to diagnose, I had to have that removed, and it was removed by a VA hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Really?
And ultimately, I never smoked, so the large lung on the left side had a baseball-sized carcinoid tumor. And when the surgeon went in, thoracic surgeon went in to remove it, I asked him to go and do the thymectomy, but there wasn't anything left to remove. So as a second thing, the only thing that works for me is Mestatin. But after that surgery, I was on Cellcept for about 3 years. And that put me back in remission, because my response, or myasthenia response to me, is that if there's a bodily insult by surgery or something else, it triggers it. And the only thing that I can take, because I'm seronegative like you, but that's my gift.
The gift was to have the lung removed, otherwise it would have killed me.
Yeah, you wouldn't even be here. That's awesome.
And the result was, in the service, it was asbestos poisoning. So at the time the lung was removed in 2004, it was about 20 years for that nonsense to just, fuel in my body and then give, I believe it gave the response. From an autoimmune system, I think, that was the key, finding. So all that was done by the VA, and I'm very grateful that I'm here today.
That's awesome.
But thank you so much for your comments, because you're spot on.
Yeah, I took Mestinon too. I took a high dose of Mestinon, the slow release, everything.
One more.
This doctor who told you were a faker, did you ever go back to the doctor and shove it in her face?
And I'm hard of hearing, but I think you said, did I ever go back to the doctor?
The doctor that called you a faker, did you ever go back to that doctor and show her your face?
No, I didn't. And it was an interesting story because, I had already been seeing a neuromuscular disease specialist in the clinic, but she was not on call. I saw this other doctor when I was in the hospital. And when she accused me of faking, I called my doctor, and she said, don't worry about it, I'll see you in the clinic. But I was already in process of getting a thymectomy with this doctor in New York, and they wanted to talk to my neurologist. And so behind my back, my doctor talked to the doctor in New York, and she's like, well, we're not sure she has myasthenia. I'm like, then what I have? And so I had to have the single fiber EMG to prove it. And I actually ended up going to Virginia, to the University of Virginia, to see a specialist just to get somebody to listen to me, and that's who got me on the CellCept and the IVIG. So I think the important point of all that is you have to be your own advocate. And that's part of the power of being connected to other people with myasthenia. It's so important to self-advocate.
And then one final question that came in online. Did you say you're in remission from diabetes or MG?
Both. Absolutely. The MG, like I said, it's been about 4 or 5 years since I've been on any treatment at all. I am able to exercise and snow ski and play golf. I do not ride my bicycle 100 miles anymore. Not in a week, not in a year, not ever. But I've been in remission for a number of years.
Wait, actually, one more. How does the weather change work with your myasthenia gravis?
So before I was in remission, weather was a huge impact. And remember, I live in Arkansas. And so the heat would make me, and I love the heat, and I love to be outside, but the heat would make me worse, the humidity would make me worse. Even if I was inside, if it was hot and humid outside, it would make the MG worse. I couldn't take a hot shower or a hot bath, and the cold really helped me, which is weird because I always hated cold. It reset my thermostat permanently.
Can we get one more question?
Sure.
Okay, one more.
Would you talk a little bit about the role of emotional stress as a contributing factor to myasthenia?
I don't know if there's any research about it being causative, but I can certainly tell you that it exacerbates the symptoms. And even the anticipation of stress, even good stress, because good stress releases some of the same hormones, and good stress is good for your body. You think about that fight or flight response. We're wired that way to respond to our environment. But chronic stress takes a terrible toll on your health. But I remember, if I was going to be in a social situation where there were going to be a lot of people and I knew I was going to need to shake hands, which I could only do about 3 times. I could shake somebody's hand, I could shake somebody's hand, I could shake somebody's hand, and that was it. But even the anticipation of someone touching me or hugging me or shaking my hand, I could have that feeling that I was getting worse. And as far as stress goes, it does have an impact, but look, I was going through a horrible divorce. I was going through denials from insurance and disability and all that. The stress after I was diagnosed and actually while I was improving was off the charts. So it's always hard for me to separate all that. It was a very difficult time in my life. Well, I wish all of you the best of luck, and I am so excited about what I see so many people doing. I can't wait to see what you do with your gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. But I have to say something about this little stool real quick. So for 20 years, I was an OB-GYN doctor, and every time I did a C-section, they had a little platform for me so I could stand up there and do that. So I love that Allison has a little platform.
Yep. How amazing was that? Just another round of applause. I think that Vickie's testimony is just amazing, and I loved hearing it in person. And if we can all walk away today with just knowing that while we do have this horrible disease, we have a gift of the people that we've met along the way. So I am going to introduce Ms. Michelle Bernadette from Argenx. She is going to give a quick little share about Argenx, and then when she is done, we're going to go on a 15-minute break, and you're welcome to go back and visit with vendors, use the restroom, and then we'll come back, and Dr. Tanya Papsdorf will give updates on the latest MG treatments. Thank you.
Hello. Whoa. So, well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Allison and the MGA for having us at this conference and for the partnership with them over the last, I think it's 5 years now. It's really exciting to see the growth and the community outreach that this group has been able to do, and to be a part of that has been wonderful. But like Allison said, my name's Michelle, and I'm with patient advocacy at Argenx. Prior to being with advocacy, I was a nurse case manager, and I did support this region, so if my name is familiar to any of you, stop and say hello. As a nurse case manager, I really only talked with patients on the phone. So now in this role, I get to actually be in the community and meet all you great people. Argenx is a global immunology company with a focus on rare neuromuscular autoimmune diseases, one of those being myasthenia gravis. We currently have 2 medications that are both for the treatment of AChR positive GMG. Our first is Vyvgart, which came out in 2021, and that's an infused medication. Our second is Vyvgart Hytrulo that came out earlier this year, which is an injection, given as an injection. If you are ocular or antibody negative, come and talk to me. I might have some information that I can that may be of interest to you. We do have 2 tables here at the conference. One of them is focused on our 2 medications, so you can grab some information on them, as well as on our support program. We have 2 nurses here that would be happy to talk to you about the My Vyvgart Path support program. We also have Pam, who is a ambassador for Argenx, and she is a individual that's on Vyvgart Hytrulo and would be happy to share her experience or answer questions if any of you have them. Our second table is our MG United, and that's really our resource table for MG. And at that table we have Courtney, who is a Argenx Uniter. So she is an individual living with myasthenia gravis, and she too can share her story with you. And so please stop by and visit with us, ask questions. We're happy to be here, and again, just want to say thank you, Allison, and to all of you for being here today and letting us support you. Thanks.
Thank you.